To access the list of executing jobs, all you need to do is expand the Jobs node here within Object Explorer. And it goes out and gathers information about any jobs that are executing, which are generally going to be reports that are executing on the server. And as you can see, I don't currently have any jobs running. Now, it's very difficult to simulate this on a report server that is not being fairly heavily used. This is on my local machine. I would have to run a whole bunch of reports in the background, long-running reports, in order to be able to get any kind of information here. Okay, so I'm not going to show you any executing reports, but for each job that it does find on a heavily used report server, it's going to display the report name, the job type, user or system that I talked about, the start time, the username for jobs initiated by a user, the job status, which would be new or running. A job is new for the first 60 seconds that it's running and changed to running thereafter. And then also a button to let you cancel an individual job. So the most important thing that you would do here is to be able to come in. If the report server is maxed out on the processor, turns out there's a rogue report that is dominating all processing, you can come in here and cancel that report. And then one other nice feature that conveys a lot of power is you can right-click on here and cancel all jobs that are currently running. Now, this is a meat-axe approach. This is not something you want to do lightly because it's going to unceremoniously stop executing any and all reports. If a user is looking at a report in Report Manager, they'll be able to see that page, but then we'll cancel that report execution. Okay, so be very careful with that. But again, if some sort of catastrophe is going down with your server, that can be a blessing. Okay, that's enough about jobs. Let's talk about security. Now, I'm not going to go into depth in security here, but I do want to point out that this is where you manage roles on the report server. Now, you don't assign roles. You can change the permissions that are associated with the role, but you can't assign roles to a particular user. For that, you have to use Report Manager. So you can both create and delete roles here, as well as manage the tasks that the members of each role can perform. Okay, so let's take a look at one. So these are all the user roles. The node is only called roles, but it's distinguished from system roles. So this is the list of user roles. So I want to take a look at my reports. So I can right-click on it, and I can create a new role. I can look at reports, and there's no built-in standard Management Studio reports for this. I can delete it, I can refresh it, and I can go into Properties. And you can see the Properties is the default setting. All right, so there's the information about my reports. Now, I've not made any changes to this. So this is the default configuration of my reports on this report server. So it's named My Reports because that's the name right there. Okay. Notice that I can't change it, it's disabled. I can change the description. So if my users are getting confused, whatever, then I can come in and include a longer, better description. And I'd certainly want to include a description for any custom roles that I create here. All right, and then down below, this is the set of tasks that members of this role can perform. Now, what you have listed here are all of the different tasks that a user role is able to have. So in this case, by default, a user that has My Reports, that as a member of that role, is able to create linked reports, view reports, manage reports, view reports, manage resources, view, manage all this stuff, and so on. But it's important to understand that these permissions relate to the My Reports folder. This is not granting all of those management permissions to the entire infrastructure or the entire organizational structure of this report server. So the user, in other words, has near sysadmin permissions within that single folder, which makes sense. They need to be able to create reports, run reports, view reports, manage resources, and all that kind of stuff, because it's all their own stuff. But you can restrict it if you want to. So I can deselect some of these. If I don't want the user to be able to manage data sources, I could deselect that. And now all members of my reports no longer are able to manage data sources within the My Reports folder. All right, so that's how you can modify what a role can do. And again, keep in mind that you can create custom roles. Then in Report Manager, assign users and groups to that custom role, and you have complete control over this set of operations or tasks that members that have your custom role can perform. But again, to emphasize the point, you can't manage users and role membership from here within Management Studio. So it's unlike how you manage security in the database engine. All right, so pretty much everything else that you do with security happens in Report Manager. Okay, so let's take a look at the browser. I'll double click on it. So this is a more minimal kind of a role. So typically users that you want to have give access to this report server instance are going to be able to view content, not manage anything, but view content. So in this case, again, these are all the default settings for this built-in role browser, is they can view reports, which means they can look at the reports, execute them. They can view resources in the folder hierarchy, so they can see them there. They can view folders. They can manage individual subscriptions and view models. So it's a relatively limited set of permissions, but by default, any members of the browser role are able to do this throughout the entire folder structure that you create on the report server. You can restrict permissions to individual folders, however. These are the default settings for the home page within Report Manager. Okay, so that's user roles. Let's take a look at system roles. So I'll take a look at system user. So I double clicked on that. First thing to notice is that fewer tasks that members of these roles can do. Again, these are all of the possible tasks that system roles can assign. In this case, system user is pretty much a default. So any user that has access to the report server is going to be a member of system user. And you can see the description. You can view system properties, shared schedules, and allow the use of Report Builder or other clients that execute report definitions. So you can view the report server properties, can't change them because the Manage Report Server Properties is disabled. You can view shared schedules, and you can execute report definitions. A fairly minimal set of permissions. Okay, but keep in mind, this is a non-admin kind of a role. But again, I can change what this role is able to do. And so I can, if I really want them to be able to manage report server properties, a dangerous role for any user to be able to do on report server, but maybe in your environment all your users are savvy enough that you can trust them not to do anything that takes down the server, then you can grant that permission as part of this role. Or you could create a custom role that conveys that permission and then assign that custom role to any users or groups that should be able to do that permission. That way, not all system users are able to manage the report server properties. So I'll go ahead and disable that. Okay, and then you can also create new roles. So I can right-click on there and create a new system role. As you see, this is pretty much identical to the dialog box that I just had open, but I need to enter my own name, my own description, and select various tasks. Okay, and then to complete the circle, I can right-click on this, and I can also delete any roles. Generally, it's not going to be terribly wise to delete any of the built-in user or system roles, but maybe you're just going to build everything based on custom roles. That's going to be a fair amount of work to do, so I would definitely start out by modifying the tasks that the different roles have and are able to perform before I started deleting these roles. But it really depends on what you want to do. Now, the one last thing about that is that you won't be able to delete any roles that are currently in use. In other words, any roles that are mapped to users. Okay? So, a lot of reasons why you might not be able to delete something. Okay, so that's a quick look at security. That's all I'm going to cover at this point. And then the last thing to look at is the shared schedules. So what a shared schedule is they're schedules that are used to perform various operations in reporting services, and specifically really geared towards executing and distributing report subscriptions on a regular basis. So the shared schedule node here in Object Explorer lets you create a new schedule, delete all the schedules, view reports, of which there are no built-in ones, and then refresh the set of schedules. So if I select New Schedule, as you'd expect, I can come in here, name the schedule something, specify that I want to begin running the schedule on some future date. So I can implement a schedule and have it start next month, if that makes sense. And then I can also optionally put in a stop date for this schedule. So in that case, you might want to set a beginning and end date for, say, a series of reports that you want to execute over the year-end holidays. You know, when the report server just isn't getting much activity, you can create a schedule, create a subscription for those reports based on that schedule, and then they'll run starting the day after Christmas and finishing on New Year's Eve, or whatever you need to do. And then there's several different recurrence patterns that you can use: hour, day, week, month, and once. And with each selection, that modifies the settings down here. So if I want to recur every hour, I can specify a start time, and then run the schedule every X number of hours and minutes. So I can be very granular with how often I want to run this. So if I wanted to run this report every 12 hours, I could specify that and that it'll happen. If I want to set a daily type of schedule, say a start time again on the following days, or I can do it every weekday or repeat after a certain number of days. And then there's various other options based on the week recurrence pattern, month recurrence pattern, and if I just want to execute once. Now, one thing to know about this in setting up shared schedules is that before you can create a new shared schedule, you do have to have SQL Server Agent running in the database engine. Otherwise, you'll get an error and you won't be able to create the shared schedule.